hello to everyone that was joining as I scooted away to get the book. So my name is Ashley Franklin, and thank you for joining us today. And I am a children's book author, primarily picture books. And I want to say that my journey started around 2015, 2016. And I honestly wouldn't say that my journey is anything special. Like a lot of, aspiring authors, I was filled with a lot of hope, a lot of, unfortunately, misinformation about how the business works and what I needed to do. But my journey owes a lot to the kidlit community, supportive librarians, other writers, and honestly, social media.
Social media. So tell me about that? Because I think we hear such negative things about social media. So that's nice to hear something positive.
Oh, absolutely. I actually got my first agent thanks to Picture Book Pitch. And that is when you pitch, your picture book on Twitter, basically with like a few lines and try to catch the interest of an editor or agent. This was a particularly tumultuous time in my life. My family was living in Louisiana. We had just been flooded out of our homes. And so everything was really up in the air for us. And so while I still had dreams of becoming a writer, real life was happening like it does for so many of us. And you come to that point where you're like, is now the right time to follow my dream? Do I put it on hold? What exactly do I do right now? And honestly, the day of Picture Book Pitch, when it came, I had no intentions of pitching, but I kept going on social media, you know how we do, for a distraction sometimes. And I kept seeing other ones I was like, I could pitch something, like I do have something. And I just took a shot, maybe in like the last hour, and I threw a couple of pitches up. So of course, I didn't get hearts, but it kind of made me still feel better that I had actually participated. And lo and behold, the following day, I saw that I did actually get a heart from an agent. And needless to say, that was the pick me up that I definitely needed at that time. And that was basically how I got my foot in the door.
And was that for Not Quite Snow White, or
what was not? It's actually a book that got absolutely nowhere. That happens sometimes. We go through different drafts and different books before our quote unquote first book is the one that actually hits. And so that first book, I don't know, I may revise it, so I won't talk about it extensively, but it did feature a little hijabi girl. And I'm laughing because I'm like, how should I say this? I got a couple of bites for it, but one thing that I heard was, sorry, we already, have a book about a little girl in a hijab. And it was actually the book Mommy's Kimar. And so, and I adore that author, Jamila Tompkins Bigelow. She is my best writing friend, and she doesn't know this, but I had decided she was going to be my nemesis. I was like, she took my shot. That was my opportunity, So the fact that she's like one of my best friends now is ironic, so to speak. But it made me work harder because I was like, okay, so I'm on to something, because it wasn't a no, it's different. Like, oh, yes, this book is terrible. Like, why did you even do this? It wasn't that or anything. It was, we kind of already have something along the lines of this. So I was like, okay, so that means there are other avenues I could explore. And so what I did was something I call using the sights, insight, hindsight, and just basically looking around the world to see what was popular, what was available. And that gave me the idea to start looking at princess things. I was like, princesses never go out of style. I was a Disney princess girl myself, but I did notice that there still was a lack when it came to Black princesses. Of course we had the Princess and the Frog, and I'll always, love that, be it that my husband's from Louisiana, my kids are born in Louisiana. However, Tiana was a frog for most of the movie, and
Yes.
that hurts. It hurts so bad, you know? So I still felt like we still need some little black girl princess representation. But being the indecisive person that I am, I could not decide on which princess I really wanted to do. And so I figured that not quite Snow White, the title came to me first. I was like, I can do a lot more with that title than just focus on Princess Snow White. And so that's how that came to be.
I love it because the book, it has so much, it has representation, but it also gets into the fact of a little girl who wants to be Snow White, and she's told for a number of reasons. I mean, skin color is one of them, but it's not the
Hmm.
only one of why she doesn't fit into being
Right.
Snow White. And but that's a theme that kind of runs into a lot of yours. Like I also love your story in Once Upon an Eid, which was also really fun because at least as far as I know, that's the only middle grade.
That was my first dabbling into middle grade, and I was scared to death. I was like, I'm used to writing for younger readers. Like, how do I do this? But it was so much fun. I had so much support from everyone that was involved with that project. It made what could have been an absolutely terrifying situation just smooth and just really loving.
Right. You get that vibe. Everything I've read about the book and everybody that's promoted, you just get the sense that it was such a joy to work on for everybody that was involved in it. But your book, excuse me, your story, again, it has that theme about things not being
Yeah.
perfect and not looking like how you think it's supposed to look. So why is that such an important message you think for kids to hear?
Now I'm going to talk about the other side of social media. So
We've talked about the
we
good
talked
side here.
about the good side. We're going to talk about the not so good side. I feel like there is so much pressure to always present your best self,
Mm-hmm.
thanks to how often you never know who has a camera up and for what reason. We're all of our lives are so accessible, whether we want them to or not, you know. And so always trying to put your best foot forward, it's taken on a whole new meaning. And I feel like kids need to know they are totally allowed to embrace and enjoy the messy parts of our
Mm-hmm.
lives. It's okay to not be perfect. It's natural and it's expected. In fact, perfection is what is not normal. And I think that's what the focus needs to be on. You know, loving your full, authentic self, not the self that you want people to love. You know, just authenticity is so important to me, and that's why embracing the perfectly imperfect you is a thread that runs through my books.
I love that. And 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 part of that, I know you said that writing is something that's really helped you find your authentic voice. Sometimes when
Yes.
you're, I think I'm trying to think how you phrased it. It was, I love the way you put it. You said it helps you find your internal voice when your external voice fails you. And now you are working with students and helping them gain confidence in their own voices. Why is that so important for young people to find their voices? And what are some of the barriers that you think you find to that? I mean, one you've kind of talked about is you feel like you have to present yourself as being really perfect, and maybe
Hmm.
they don't want to share their stories, but
Well, to me, a silenced voice is an oppressed voice,
mm,
and a silent voice has no power. And it doesn't just have to be, you know, I did mention social media, but it could be so much simpler than that. I think one thing that we tend not to consider is that sometimes we are our own greatest enemies or critiquers of ourselves.
mhm,
And that could be due to a multitude, you know, how you were raised, your friend circle, your family, just all types of outside scenarios. They come together to really impact our inner voice, our true selves. And I think that sometimes we just need to be able to silence all those other voices
mhm,
to get down to our true selves that want to be expressed, the vivaciousness that lives within all of us. You know, they say dance like no one's watching.
mhm,
That version of ourselves that is unapologetically who we are,
mhm.
it's so much strength in that, and we need more of that in society. Just the world is so full of diverse thinkers and people. And imagine if we all can use our voice for good, you know? And that's something that I hope to inspire readers to do at any age. You know, even my students that I teach at the college level, you know, I encourage them, you know, find your voice, you know, be yourself in the discussion board, you know, your own experiences contribute a lot to who you are. I think it's a valuable lesson at any age.
Definitely. What do you think help motivate you? You know, for yourself to find that authentic voice, that to dig deeper.
I would say my children, for one. I felt like I needed to find my voice so they knew that they could find their own. They had an example. You know, we lead by example.
Right.
And that's definitely one of my reasons. Another motivation for me, I would say, would be my mother.
Mm.
You know, my mom was a single parent for a long time, and she never let anything silence her, keeping her from being the best version of herself that she could be. And there are many lessons that she instilled in me. You know, recently I wrote a blog post, you know, and I basically it was a shout out to my mom because I was talking about Barbies, and my mom always made sure that, you know, I had black and brown Barbies. So I always felt seen and represented in a positive way, even through play.
Mm-hmm. I actually I'm glad you brought that up because I read the blog post and it was actually a little surprising to me because growing up I had a lot of issues with Barbie. And so it was interesting to read how much you loved it. And I know, and I think you said that you would love to write one of the books to go with the either the movie or just about Barbie. And then you've written, of course, you have a Little Mermaid book.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think people, at least for me, it was surprising to hear you say that you'd want to write about Barbie. So can you tell us a little bit more about that and why, how would that change things if you wrote a Barbie book?
You know what? I wouldn't even say that it would change things spectacularly. It's one of my writer bucket lists, so to speak.
Uh-huh.
And, you know, like Disney was on my bucket list. And for me, I think as an author, as a writer, it's important to continue to push yourself. And I always like to see if I can be in spaces that I never thought that I could be in.
Mm-hmm.
And just childhood me, who was meek and quiet, but usually tended to use her Barbies to play and figure out how to interact with the world. For me, that would come full circle if I had the opportunity to write a Barbie book. And like I said, I'm well aware, and like I said in the blog post as well, about the mixed feelings of Barbies, you know, the perfect image, the body image, all of that. Baby, I was fat, I was black, I was dark skinned, I had a little bits of hair. Like, I did not fit that ideal perception of Barbie
Right.
at all. But I always knew how to separate that.
Mm-hmm.
That was never an issue for me. Like, this is a toy, this is make believe, this doesn't have anything to do with who I am and how I am. But it's fun playing dress up, you
Right.
know. I know for some it is harder to separate, you know, especially with images and representation. If you're always, again, talking about perfection and imperfection and how I present them in my books, if you are always presented with that perfect Barbie, of course you would have issues with that, especially if you're not giving an alternative.
Right.
Like for me, that was never an issue. I had the alternatives
Mm-hmm.
presented to me at the same level, if not higher than, you know, the images that I was faced with or greeted with. So I feel profoundly for those, you know, who weren't given that opportunity to love on themselves as much as they could,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because they felt like a toy was giving them a false perception of
Right.
who they could be, of who they were, or who they could never be.
Right.
Because, of course, I would never wish that on anybody. And to anyone out there who had those feelings, I just want to let you know that you've got just enough of all the right stuff, okay?
I love it. I love that. And I love how your mom, I think, like you said, kind of helped shape that by, because she always made sure that you had like the black and the brown Barbies
Mhm.
and how, and just seems like how she kind of how she surrounded you with a lot of other positive images
Yes.
that made that really work. Well, I was just looking at the time. I want to make sure we have time to talk about your new book, which is so exciting. Kind of the other side of the other end of the spectrum. And can you tell us about it and what was the inspiration behind it?
The Masjid Kamal Loves, of course, is written by me, illustrated by Aaliyah Jaleel. And here's the cover again. Gorgeous
Oh,
colors. I love colors. So the second I saw this cover, I was like, I'm a fan. I love everything about this. It can do me no wrong. And so my inspiration again were my children.
mm,
Um, we're the only Muslims in our families on both sides.
mm,
And I wanted something that they could turn to as a representation of being
mm,
seen
mhm,
and how they feel when they go to the masjid themselves. Um, it was twofold, actually. I remember as an adult, going to the masjid for the first time and the excitement I felt, just being in a new space, learning about a new religion, experiencing new people, and sometimes it was new foods, so
mhm.
much newness. It was like sensory overload. And I loved every minute of it, honestly. And so I got to tap into my own personal feelings for that. And I remember, like I said, taking my own children when they were very young, but also coming at it from a mother's perspective, like, how are they going to act? Are they going to be okay? Are they going to disturb others? But seeing how the community, would just like pat them on the head, embrace them, pick them up and laugh when I'm like, oh my gosh, why are they doing that? And so just that feeling of when you're really amongst community, I wanted to show that and express that in a joyous way. I feel like books, they can be mirrors, windows, sliding glass doors, all of that. And I feel like there tends to be a struggle moment in a lot of books where people of color and Black people are concerned. And we definitely need those books.
Right.
Those books have a place on our shelves. Absolutely. And there are many authors who are doing that.
Mhm.
Me personally, I tend to skew the other way and try to focus on more of the joyous components because I also recognize that sometimes it's also good to escape from the negatives, escape from the harsh realities of the world, and just focus on those pockets of joy.
I'm glad you said it because that was something I really noticed about it. Like you said, that there are so many books when you're talking about people of color and they're all about struggle, which as you said, we need those books
Yeah,
too, but it's also great to have just the joy. And I think as a non-Muslim, I think it's also important for us to understand that joy that you feel going to the masjid, being in that community. What do you hope that Muslim kids will get out of the book? And then what do you hope that non-Muslim kids who read it, what do you hope that they take away from it?
well, first, I hope that Muslim kids, I hope it resonates with them. For even, I've had adult Muslims say that it brought a sense of nostalgia to them from their younger years.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes me feel good as someone who didn't get to experience the masjid in that particular way. And so, again, I hope Muslim kids are like, I did that when I was younger, or I did that last week. Just so it's so important to see your lived experiences, not even the ones that are just picture perfect
Right.
or acceptable. Again, trying to step away from that perfect image and embracing the totality of who we are,
Mm-hmm.
the good, the bad, the
Right.
mischievous, all of that. It makes us human, and that's what makes us so wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as, I guess, non Muslims who read the book, what would I want them to learn? Honestly, I have the author's note at the back, but there are plenty of other Islamic and Muslim written books that specifically focus on the learning.
Mm-hmm.
I would want non Muslims to really feel
Mm,
Because even if you've never been to a masjid, perhaps you've been to a church or your place of worship, or just a place of community, that a community center that has meant something to you in your life, and it brings back that moment of joy for you. So you can recognize, like, you know what? This is an important community space for them, and I get that.
mhm.
I get that even if I don't understand it on a personal level, it still resonates.
Right. Which I think goes back to what you're talking about, that authenticity.
Hmm.
That when there's that authentic voice, even if we don't have exactly the same experience, like
Yeah.
you say, we resonate with the emotions of it. So I love that you're that focus on the feeling that you get from it, that emotion. Um and I'm looking at the time. I know you're busy, so I don't want to take up too much of your time, but maybe we could just end. Well, first of all, congratulations on the book. It's
Thank
gotten
you.
some buzz and it looks so beautiful. And so I kind of hate to ask because you just had this book come out, but are you working on something else now?
I mean,
Or
as
else
a writer, that's the only way to do it.
you're
We
always
have to constantly work on things so we're not focused on how's this doing, what now, what now, what now, what now. And so I'm still working on new picture books, and I've gotten over my nervousness of working on middle grade. So I'm working on a middle grade novel right
working.
now. And so
Well,
that's
I'm
taken up
glad.
a lot of my time, but I'm super excited about it. And I'm just trying to work on whatever comes to mind, honestly. Whatever brings me joy, that's what I'm trying to bring to the table.